Welcome back to my channel. Hey everyone, before we start, here's a short summary so you know what the story is about. Then we'll go into the full story. Max begins a new chapter in the city, carrying both hope and loneliness, until an unexpected meeting with Emma fills his days with warmth and companionship. Through shared moments and the challenges of change, their friendship deepens, blossoming into unspoken love. In the end, Max realizes his big move was not about a new place at all, but about finding a true home in Emma's heart. Now, let's begin the full story. Max's journey began on a quiet morning when the streets of his old town seemed smaller than his dreams. He had lived there for years, surrounded by familiar faces and routines that had long since lost their charm. The decision to move was not made lightly. It was born from a restless longing, a need for change that stirred deep within him. He packed his life into boxes, each one filled with memories of a place that had shaped him, but no longer felt like it belonged to the man he was becoming. With every taped corner and folded shirt, he felt the weight of leaving behind not only his home, but also the comfort of certainty. There was courage in his choice, though it was wrapped in quiet fear, the kind that lingers in silence when the night is still. When Max boarded the train to the city, the rhythm of the wheels against the track seemed to echo his own heartbeat. The landscape outside shifted with every mile, carrying him closer to the unknown. His mind wandered between excitement and doubt, questions rising like waves. Would he find friends in this new place? Would the city welcome him, or would it swallow him whole, leaving him to drift alone in its endless tide of strangers? Yet, even as uncertainty pressed upon him, there was a spark of hope that refused to be dimmed. As the train slowed into the station, Max caught his reflection in the window. He looked at himself as though seeing a stranger. There was determination in his eyes, though softened by the shadow of loneliness. For all the dreams he carried, he knew he also carried an ache, a quiet longing for connection, for someone who might share the weight of his journey. He stepped onto the platform, the crowd bustling around him, and for a moment he felt small. The city stretched high above, vast and unfamiliar, its noise filling the air with an energy that was both thrilling and overwhelming. Walking through the streets, Max noticed the details that marked this new beginning. The laughter of children running past him, the smell of fresh bread drifting from a nearby bakery, the clatter of footsteps on cobblestones that seemed to tell their own stories. Every sight and sound reminded him that life was happening here in ways he had yet to discover. He was a newcomer, a single thread entering a tapestry already rich with colors and patterns, and he wondered where he might find his place within it. That first evening, when the sun dipped low and painted the sky in gold and rose, Max sat by his window in a small apartment that still smelled of paint and dust. He unpacked one box, placing a photograph on the table, a reminder of where he came from. Yet as he looked out at the glowing city lights, he felt something stir inside him, a whisper that maybe this move was not only about chasing dreams. Maybe it was also about finding the missing piece of his heart, the kind that no city could offer unless fate placed the right person in his path. And so, with the night falling softly around him, Max's new beginning carried both the sweetness of hope and the gentle ache of loneliness, setting the stage for what was yet to come. On the very first morning in his new apartment, Max woke earlier than usual, stirred by the unfamiliar sounds of the city that slipped through his open window. The rumble of distant buses, the rhythm of footsteps on the street below, even the chatter of neighbors drifting faintly through the walls, all of it reminded him he was a stranger here, learning the melody of a place not yet his own. He rose, determined to make the day useful, though a trace of hesitation lingered in his movements. The boxes still sat unopened, stacked like silent companions in the corner, waiting for his attention. He decided that coffee might give him the courage he needed, and so he ventured into the hallway with the hope of finding something to ease the weight of starting over. It was there, at the threshold of his new life, that fate intervened. As he fumbled with his keys, uncertain whether he had locked the door properly, he nearly collided with a young woman carrying a basket of folded laundry. She steadied herself with grace, her smile immediate and warm, a smile that seemed to melt the awkwardness of the moment. Her name, she told him, was Emma, and she lived just across the hall. Her voice carried a kindness that felt rare, the sort that wrapped itself around you before you even knew you needed it. Max, still nervous, introduced himself, his words stumbling out in a way that betrayed both his shyness and his eagerness to belong. Emma listened with patience, her eyes bright with interest rather than judgment. She noticed the unopened boxes inside his doorway and, without hesitation, offered her help. It was such a simple gesture, yet to Max it felt like a hand reaching out to guide him through the fog of solitude. In that moment, the loneliness that had followed him from his old town loosened its grip, if only slightly. They spoke as she helped him carry a few things into place. Their conversation moved easily, as if it had been waiting for this very moment. She asked about his journey, his reasons for moving, and he found himself answering honestly, surprised by how natural it felt to share pieces of his story with her. She spoke too, telling him about the city, the best little cafes hidden on side streets, the park that bloomed with flowers in spring, the quiet library where she spent her Sunday afternoons. Each word she offered painted the city in softer colors, making it feel less daunting, more like a home waiting to be discovered. As they worked together, the afternoon light shifted, casting golden hues across the room. Max noticed how her laughter filled the empty space, how it gave the apartment a warmth the bare walls could not yet provide. Though it was only the beginning of their acquaintance, he sensed something in her presence that steadied him, something that hinted his move might not be defined by loneliness after all. By the time Emma returned to her own apartment, leaving behind a promise to visit again soon, Max felt the weight of the day lift. He closed the door softly, carrying with him the certainty that the city, once so overwhelming, had already offered him a gift he had not dared to expect. It did not take long for Max and Emma to fall into a rhythm that felt both natural and unexpected, as though their days had quietly begun to weave together without either of them making much effort. What started with a casual greeting in the hallway grew into mornings spent over coffee at the small cafe on the corner. Max, still new to the city, found comfort in these early rituals, the steam rising from his cup as Emma's laughter filled the air. She spoke about her work, her friends, the little things that made her day lighter, and he listened with a quiet eagerness, his own stories tumbling out in return. There was a simplicity to it, yet beneath that simplicity lay the beginnings of something far more tender. Their mornings often drifted into afternoons. They explored markets together, stopping to sample fresh fruit, or wandered into bookstores where Emma would pick out a novel and place it gently in Max's hands, insisting that it would change the way he saw the world. He began to notice how her presence made even the most ordinary errands feel like small adventures. A walk through the park to buy groceries became an occasion for conversation that stretched far beyond the practical. They spoke about their childhoods, about the dreams they carried quietly in their hearts, about the fears they had never confessed to anyone else. With each shared word, the invisible distance between them grew smaller. Evenings, too, became their own kind of treasure. Sometimes they would walk side by side through the quiet streets, the glow of lamplight softening the edges of the city. Other times they would sit on a bench in the park, watching the world pass by in slow motion, the silence between them as meaningful as their conversations. There were moments when their shoulders brushed, when their hands almost touched, and in those fleeting seconds Max felt his heart stumble in a way he could not explain. He wondered if Emma noticed, or if she too felt the same quiet spark that seemed to linger in the air whenever they were together. It was not grand gestures that marked these days, but the smallest details. The way she saved him a seat by the window, knowing he liked the light. The way he carried her books when her arms were full, even though she never asked. The way their laughter came easily, spilling out into spaces that had once felt empty. These small joys became the threads of their bond, binding them gently, though neither spoke of it aloud. For Max, the city no longer seemed overwhelming, nor did it feel like a place where he was destined to walk alone. Through the moments he shared with Emma, he began to see not just streets and buildings, but possibilities that whispered of love, of belonging, and of a future he had not dared to imagine when he first arrived. Despite the ease of his shared moments with Emma, Max soon discovered that starting over in a new place was not without its shadows. The city, with all its brightness and noise, sometimes felt too large, too fast, too indifferent to a man still learning how to belong. He would wake some mornings with the weight of doubt pressing against his chest, wondering if he had made a mistake in leaving the familiar comfort of his old home. The streets, once exciting, now stretched endlessly before him, filled with faces that passed without recognition. Work was demanding, the hours long, and the unfamiliar responsibilities left him drained. There were nights when he sat by his window, staring at the restless glow of the city, feeling as though he were an outsider peering into a life he could not yet claim as his own. Yet in those moments of uncertainty, Emma's presence became his steadying force. She seemed to sense when the world pressed too heavily upon him, arriving with a warm meal, a gentle smile, or simply her company. She had a gift for lightening the weight of silence, drawing him into laughter when his thoughts threatened to pull him under. Max found himself leaning on her kindness in ways he had not expected. It was not that she erased his struggles. Life in a new city remained difficult, but she gave him the courage to face them. There was a day, not long after a particularly trying week at work, when Max confessed his fears to her. They sat on a bench beneath the fading light, the air cool around them, and he spoke with a raw honesty he had kept hidden. He admitted how lost he sometimes felt, how the city seemed to magnify his loneliness when she was not near, how he feared he might never truly fit in. Emma listened without interruption, her eyes never leaving his. When he finished, she reached for his hand in a quiet gesture of reassurance. She told him that struggles were not signs of failure, but steps in the journey of becoming stronger, and that he was not walking through them alone. Her words, simple as they were, settled into his heart with a calmness he had not known for weeks. It was in moments like this that Max began to see Emma not only as a neighbor or a friend, but as a source of light he had not realized he needed. She had a way of turning the heaviness of his doubts into something bearable, of reminding him that change, though difficult, could also lead to beauty. The more he leaned on her presence, the more he began to believe that his struggles did not define him, but rather the strength he found in enduring them. And as the city continued to challenge him, Max discovered that the very hardships he feared were also the ones that deepened his bond with Emma, making her light shine even brighter against the shadows of his uncertainty. As the days slipped into weeks, Max and Emma's companionship began to take on a different shape, one that neither of them named, but both quietly felt. What began as casual mornings over coffee and evening walks had grown into a closeness that seemed to weave itself into the very rhythm of their lives. Max noticed how naturally he reached for his phone to tell her something funny that happened at work, or how easily he found himself waiting for the sound of her footsteps in the hallway. Emma, too, seemed to anticipate his presence, leaving her door open just a little longer in the evenings, as though she hoped he might stop by before retreating to his own apartment. Their laughter became the language they spoke most often, ringing out in cafes, on sidewalks, or even in the quiet of Max's living room when they shared stories about childhood mishaps or dreams that still lingered just out of reach. Yet beneath the laughter lay something unspoken, a tenderness that revealed itself in fleeting glances, and in the way silence between them no longer felt empty but full, carrying meanings they both understood without saying aloud. One evening, as they walked through the park beneath the soft glow of streetlights, Emma began telling Max about her favorite place in the city, a small garden hidden behind tall iron gates that hardly anyone seemed to notice. She led him there, and together they stepped into a space that felt almost enchanted, with roses climbing against the walls and benches tucked into quiet corners. They sat there for hours, speaking in voices softened by the night, and when the air grew colder, Max draped his jacket across her shoulders without thinking. She looked at him then in a way that made his chest tighten, as though a question lingered on her lips, but she said nothing. The silence between them held more weight than words ever could. From that night on, Max became increasingly aware of the shift in his feelings. He found himself watching her with an attentiveness he could not disguise. The way her hair caught the light, the way her laughter seemed to fill the space around them with warmth, the way her kindness was not loud or showy but steady and true. He wondered if she noticed the way he hesitated when their hands brushed, or if she, too, felt the spark that seemed to pulse in those small moments. Still, neither of them spoke of it directly. Perhaps they were afraid to name it too soon, fearing that putting it into words might break the delicate balance they had found. Instead, they let it bloom quietly, allowing their friendship to carry them forward, even as something deeper stirred beneath the surface. And though the feelings remained unspoken, each shared glance, each lingering smile, made it clear that their bond was no longer only friendship, but the beginning of something far more tender. The seasons began to change, and with them, Max found himself changing too. What had once felt foreign now carried the comfort of familiarity. The streets no longer overwhelmed him. Instead, they whispered with memories of laughter shared and walks taken side by side with Emma. The cafe on the corner was no longer just a place to drink coffee, but a reminder of mornings filled with stories and smiles. Even the smallest details of his apartment, the chair by the window, the photograph on the table, seemed softer now, touched by the presence of someone who had brought light into the quiet corners of his life. It was during one of those evenings when the city glowed in golden light that Max truly understood the nature of his journey. They had been walking together, their steps unhurried, their conversation gentle, when Emma stopped to admire the flowers in a shop window. She leaned close, her hair catching the last traces of sunlight, and Max felt a clarity he had never known before. The reason for his move, the longing that had pressed him forward, was no longer about chasing a dream of success or adventure. It was about this very moment, about the woman beside him, whose presence made every street feel like home. He thought back to the nights when loneliness had weighed on him, when he had wondered if the city would ever welcome him. He remembered how Emma's kindness had carried him through those shadows, how her laughter had replaced silence, how her steady presence had become the anchor he did not know he was searching for. All along, he had believed his move was about leaving something behind, but now he saw it was about finding something greater. Their friendship, with its laughter and unspoken feelings, had grown into something deeper, something that asked not to be ignored. Max knew the time had come for a decision, one that would define not only his future, but also the meaning of his move. He could continue as they were, holding back his feelings, or he could speak the truth that had been building in his heart. That night, as they sat on the bench in the quiet garden she had once shown him, Max gathered the courage to tell Emma what he had come to realize. He spoke not with grand gestures or rehearsed words, but with the honesty she had always inspired in him. He told her that moving to the city had given him many things, but above all, it had given him her. He told her that his heart, once so restless, had found its home in her presence. Emma listened, her eyes soft with emotion, and when she placed her hand in his, the silence between them spoke louder than any words could. In that moment, Max understood that his big move had never been about a place at all. It had always been about love, and about finding a home not in walls or streets, but in Emma's heart.